Good Shabbos again, everybody. This past summer, I had the opportunity to be at a lake house with my entire extended family. And on that Sunday morning, I was in charge of taking out all the nieces and nephews, mostly under the age of 12, out on the lake. And I decided to be fun and stupid, Uncle Brian. I allowed my 7-year-old nephew, I was on the jet ski, to actually be in charge of driving the jet ski as we pulled his other cousins on the inner tube. And everything was going fine until my 7-year-old nephew decided to go before he was supposed to go, and the rope got caught up in the jet ski. Cool Uncle Brian was really dumb Uncle Brian. And that mistake was a big bill, thousands of dollars. And so I quickly acted like a 7-year-old and said it wasn't my fault. The 7-year-old's to blame. And I was reminded that expression, it's not my fault, and blaming someone else is a common expression that children, adults, and even rabbis use from time to time. I was reminded that the mistake I made by letting my 7-year-old be in charge to try to give him a good time allowed me to have that awful tendency to blame others for our mistakes. And that tendency isn't limited to children. We all have that human inclination now and then. We look at something that we've done and that we wish we hadn't done, or that we knew we shouldn't have done, and we pretend that we didn't choose to do it. Or something bad happens, and as an unintended result of something we did, and we pretend it has nothing to do with us. It's always easier to blame someone else, blame the circumstance, blame someone who may have nothing to do with what happened. It's hard at times to take responsibility for the mistakes that we make. That's what happens in the second creation story that we found in our Torah portion this morning. Adam and Eve eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil and are banished from the Garden of Eden because of it. And as I looked at the Torah portion this year, I reflected on how the issue of personal responsibility is a critical part of this story. When Adam is asked why he ate of the tree, he says that the woman gave him the fruit. And when God asks Eve why she ate of the fruit, she says the snake deceived her, and that's why she ate it. Neither Adam nor Eve take responsibility for having eaten the fruit. Yes, most people think Adam and Eve were expelled from the Garden of Eden because they ate from the tree of knowledge. But I think they were expelled from the garden because they didn't take responsibility for their actions. Because there's power in taking responsibility for what we choose to do. I would argue that our young today, as great as they are, and with all the positive developments we find amongst our young today, unfortunately, I find more and more that our young seem to be taking less responsibility for their actions than ever before. Why? There are many reasons, too many to explain in one sermon. But today, I want to focus in on one major cause. We all know that as smartphone, gaming, and social media addiction continues to increase for our young, there are numerous short and long-term negative effects. Disruptions to their sleeping habits, leading to fatigue, even insomnia, more isolation and less socialization opportunities, which can lead to a loss of friends and decreased social skills. And it can also lead to more of our young entering the adult world completely unprepared, not knowing how to complete basic adult tasks, interacting and dealing with real people, managers and supervisors, college professors and landlords, or even completing household chores, mowing the lawn. When's the last time you saw a teen mowing the lawn? Cleaning the kitchen, even doing their own laundry. I was shocked when my oldest son, went to college, and I saw many of his parents, many of the friends' parents, his roommates, and other people that he knew, the parents actually hired laundry services for their freshman children because they didn't know how to use a washing machine. Compared to previous generations, teens today are less involved, less likely to work, and even less likely to drive. Maybe that's a good thing. Too many of our young are having a difficult time taking full responsibility for their lives, to complete any task outside of the virtual world. This past weekend, I had an opportunity to go to Parents' Weekend in Austin, and I was at a parents' dinner that Saturday night, and I was with a doctor, an investment banker, and a TV producer, and they all said the same thing. Too many young adults in their industries are having a hard time taking personal responsibility for their mistakes. Instead of putting in the long hours, they like to blame other people. Instead of owning up when things go wrong, they find ways to blame other people, never taking a personal accounting of where they themselves went wrong. And we're seeing this trend too often. Popular Canadian psychologist and writer Jordan Peterson has talked about the importance of accepting personal responsibility and the dangers of seeing yourself as a victim. Jonathan Haidt, the American social psychologist, has spoken about the politics of victimhood and how those politics of victimhood are threatening free speech on university campuses throughout the United States. And Harvard sociologist Robert Putnam has written about how the loss of communal responsibility has led to a breakdown of families and communities. It's also the story told by the prophets of our Tanakh, our Hebrew Bible. We hear from Elijah, Elisha, Amos, Hosea, Isaiah, and Jeremiah. Without that deeply internalized sense of collective responsibility for the common good, society begins to fracture and fragment. Before online gaming and cell phone addiction, our young spent more time learning in the real world, with peers, with teachers, with grandparents, with parents. It used to be that parents and other adult mentors taught children, then empowered them to take on more responsibilities as they got older. Now, too often, they're stuck online and learn mostly there. It's an online, unrealistic world where they never learn to be responsible to take care of themselves, other people, even their loved ones. It should be of no surprise that children actually today are growing up to be less caring and less compassionate than in previous generations. University of Michigan research suggests that today's college students are 40% less empathetic compared to their peers just 30 years ago. Meanwhile, the level of narcissism has increased by 58%. A popular educational psychologist reminds us it's very hard to be empathetic and feel for another human being if you can't read another person's emotions. You don't learn emotional literacy facing a screen. You don't learn emotional literacy with emojis. It's simply hard to care for other people if you don't interact with them as much, and then to feel responsible to help them when they're in need. And the result, my friends, is that too many of our young feel less compelled to help others IRL, in real life. I know that social media and smartphones aren't going anywhere. If anything, the smartphones that we use are going to get even more addicting, even easier to use. And so can we encourage the responsible use of online media to learn, to create, and to participate? As writer David Brooks wrote in 2017, he writes, can we remind our young that the online world is a place for human contact, but not for human intimacy? It's a place for information, but not for reflection. It's a place for exploration that discourages cohesion. And it's a place that grabs your attention and then scatters it. But in the real world is a task-oriented space where duties and commitments need to be kept. And can we also do a better job ourselves, demonstrating to our children what it means to take on young adult responsibilities? around our beautiful children? Can we teach them the meaning of words like ought, should, duty, obligation, loyalty, virtue, honor, and then live by those words? Do we? Do we keep our promises to our supervisors, co-workers, and to our neighbors? Do we hold on to our commitments to our friends, loved ones, and especially to our children? When our younger are away from their computers, if they see us not living by our duties, then why should they? In many ways, they're only going to learn the values of honor and obligation if we too are living by them. They won't find them online. Yes, they can learn them from their teachers. They can learn them from coaches. They can learn them from grandparents and other mentors. But ultimately, they need to learn from us, their parents. Let me end with the following story. I'll never forget years ago during my freshman year of college, that summer between freshman year and sophomore year, I went back to Dallas to work. And I was determined to find a great job to prepare me for the real world. And after a few days, it was very hard to find a job for 2.5 months while I was going to be home in Dallas. So I got a job at Payless Shoe Source. You remember those stores? I think they're still around. You go in and you pick what shoes you want off the shelves, and if they don't fit, you just leave them on the ground. Well, as the youngest guy on the totem pole, I was the guy in charge of picking up those shoes and finding out where to put them out, figuring out where to put them back on the shelves. And kids would come in, families would come in, people would come in and scatter those shoes everywhere. Within 3 days, I was dying. And I hated shoes more than ever before. And the smell, it was awful. I try to stay away from shoe stores until this day. But then I was really excited. After 3 days, one of the resumes I turned in was to a bank. And they were willing to offer me an internship at the bank for that summer. It was a much better job, much better and more likely to lead to what I was interested in at the time of being an accountant. So I went home that afternoon. I was so excited to tell my parents, Dad, Mom, I can get out of the shoe store. I got this internship at the bank. My parents started to laugh. They said, no, Brian, you're not going to that bank. You're staying at that shoe store. I said, are you kidding? I said, this is my dream internship. This is what I want to do one day. They said, Brian, you made that commitment to be at that shoe store this summer, and you need to keep your commitments. And so I did. And that summer taught me firsthand the importance of keeping my commitments, even when it was hard. Shabbat shalom, everyone. Let us now return